The bride covered her face in shame. He pulled her veil gently and said, "You're beautiful." The church in Dry Creek was dead quiet, except for the creak of the wooden benches and the restless coughs of men in dust-worn hats. Outside, the sun bled red across the horizon, cutting through the high desert like a knife. It should have been a day of celebration, but every soul gathered in that one-room chapel felt a chill run deeper than any wind. She stood at the altar, trembling. Her veil was thin muslin, patched and dirt-stained from the ride in. Nobody knew her. Nobody even knew her name until the preacher whispered it, voice cracked with disbelief. Evelyn. They said she was brought on the evening stagecoach, escorted by a man with no name, a stranger whose eyes never blinked. She had not spoken since, except one word, yes, when the preacher asked if she was willing. The widowed rancher, Thomas Keene, towered above her, his shoulders like oak beams, his hands raw from years of rope and steel. His wife had been dead 2 winters, leaving him with an empty house and a hollow stare. Folks whispered he'd paid for this bride. Others swore she'd run from some outlaw clan in the mountains. Whatever the truth, Dry Creek had never seen a wedding so cursed with silence. When Thomas lifted the veil, the hush deepened. Her face was pale as bone, with eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the flicker of lantern light. She flinched as though his touch burned her, but when his whisper fell, "You're beautiful," her lips parted with something between a sob and a warning. That was when the first gunshot cracked outside. The doors slammed open, and a gust of desert grit howled in. Shadows moved against the sunlight, long and ragged, men on horseback circling like wolves. 6 of them, rifles gleaming. Nobody breathed. The bride's hands clutched her skirts, twisting the fabric as if she'd known this moment would come. Her dark eyes met Thomas's, filled with something he could not name, terror, maybe guilt. The leader of the riders stepped inside. His boots were caked in red dust, his coat torn at the sleeve. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that cut deeper than any blade. "Well," he drawled, "looks like we found her." The townsfolk scattered to the corners of the chapel, muttering prayers. The preacher trembled behind his Bible. Only Thomas stood his ground, his body blocking the stranger's view of the girl. "She's mine," Thomas said, voice steady as iron. The man laughed. "Yours? Oh no, Keene. She belongs to us. You don't know what you're holding." The bride whimpered, pulling at Thomas's sleeve, as if begging him not to fight. But it was too late. His jaw set like stone, and every man in that chapel knew blood was about to soak the floorboards. That night changed Dry Creek forever. The riders forced their way into town, guns glinting in the fading light. They spoke her name like a curse, Evelyn Blackwood, and the townsfolk whispered it after them, as though afraid it might summon death itself. They claimed she was the daughter of a gang lord, promised in marriage to a man who ran whiskey and bullets along the border. But she had fled. Why? No one asked. Not yet. Thomas Keene, stubborn as a mule, stood at her side and refused to give her up. His voice carried like thunder across the chapel, swearing before God and man that no one would take his bride from him, not alive. So the gang circled Dry Creek, torching fences and shooting cattle, waiting for dawn. Inside the rancher's house, Evelyn sat by the fire, veil torn away, eyes hollow. Thomas poured coffee into a chipped tin cup, sliding it toward her. "Tell me the truth," he said. She looked at him, lips trembling. "If I do, you'll wish you'd never lifted my veil." He leaned closer, hand firm on the table. "Then tell me anyway." And so she did. Her father, Jeremiah Blackwood, was a name whispered in outlaw camps like a hymn to hell. He'd killed sheriffs, burned towns, buried rivals alive. Evelyn had been promised to his cruelest lieutenant, a man called Cutter, known for carving the skin of those who crossed him. But on the night of her wedding, she ran. She had stolen something, a map, hidden in the hem of her dress, that showed where her father's treasure was buried. Gold and blood money enough to buy half the territory. Thomas sat back, silent. "You think they want me," she whispered, tears burning her cheeks, "but it's not me they're after. It's what I carry. And they'll kill anyone who stands between us." At dawn, the riders attacked. Dry Creek became a war ground. Windows shattered, bullets screamed through the air, and smoke rose from burning roofs. Townsfolk scrambled for cover, but Thomas took his rifle and stood in the open street. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, his boots dug deep into the dust. Evelyn, clutching her skirts, cried for him to hide, but he only glanced back at her once, his gaze steady as if he had already decided, if she fell into their hands, she would never rise again. The first rider charged. Thomas fired once, and the man toppled from his saddle, rolling lifeless into the dirt. Another came, and another fell. His bullets sang like judgment, each one ripping through the desert morning. But the leader, Cutter himself, rode tall and grinning, swinging his revolver with cruel precision. He shot Thomas in the shoulder, spinning him back against the trough. The bride screamed, rushing toward him, but Thomas shouted, "Run, Evelyn." Instead, she pulled the hidden map from her dress and held it high, her voice breaking, "This is what you want. Take it, and leave him." Cutter's eyes gleamed. He dismounted slow, boots crunching against the dust, hand outstretched. Smart girl. But Thomas, bleeding, forced himself up. His rifle was empty, but his will was not. With a roar, he lunged forward, slamming Cutter to the ground. They grappled in the dirt, fists and fury, Evelyn sobbing as men circled, waiting for blood. Then it happened. She picked up Thomas's fallen rifle, hands shaking. For the first time since she had arrived in Dry Creek, she found her voice. "Let him go," she cried, barrel pointed at Cutter's chest. The gang froze. Cutter laughed, spitting blood. You haven't got the guts." Her finger trembled on the trigger. Her breath came ragged. Then her eyes hardened, like black stone. The shot thundered. Cutter went still. The riders scattered, some swearing vengeance, others fleeing into the horizon. Smoke drifted over Dry Creek, carrying the smell of gunpowder and grief. Thomas collapsed, bleeding in the dust. Evelyn dropped the rifle and fell to her knees beside him, sobbing. "You should have let me go," she whispered. But Thomas's hand, rough and trembling, reached for hers. His voice was faint but steady. "I lifted your veil," he murmured, "and I saw the truth. You're beautiful, not for what you ran from, but for what you chose." The town would speak of that day for generations. Some said the bride cursed them all by bringing the Blackwood name to Dry Creek. Others swore she redeemed herself in the smoke and fire of battle. But one truth could not be denied. When the bride had covered her face in shame, Thomas Keene had lifted her veil, and what he saw was not just a woman, but a storm. And storms, in the West, left nothing unchanged.